This is my old Linux install process. And this is my Linux install process 2.0. I redesigned my entire Linux reinstall workflow because there are a few specific things that I realized about Linux. So maybe you heard about Linux and maybe you heard that it was better than any other operating system. But if it is, why do you need to care about reinstall processes when you don't with other operating systems? Because to me, it feels like a downgrade. After working with Linux for 15 plus years, I realized that I was still doing the very same mistakes that I was doing at the start. And that all starts with thinking that Linux is robust and never breaks, and so you don't have to care about installing things on Linux because you're only going to install things once. Linux is only robust because there is the reinstallment process that is included in it, meaning that if something were to happen to your Linux system, then all you have to do is just reinstall everything. And this is something that is part and parcel of the Linux process. And this is super, super crucial because once you understand that reinstallment is part of having a robust Linux system, because you need to be able to install things or reinstall things rather in a very simple way. So that's one of the reasons why you need a reinstall process. I kind of understood that, but there is something that I was doing wrong in my previous process, which is this one. So when I realized that I needed to reinstall things, then the first thing that I started to do was documenting what I was doing. So I took snapshot of everything that I did to install things. So the snapshots are basically procedures or processes, right? So this is process number 1, this is process number 2, this is process number 3. But here's one of the first problems with that approach. Yeah, it's easy to document things, even though like that still takes time, but in this case, they were not even like sequentially ordered. And so that wasn't very efficient when I wanted to reinstall again. So that was the first mistake. There were no order. Basically, they were not optimized for reliability and ease of use. That just happened to be whatever I was doing when I was installing a specific thing. For example, if I was installing Python, then maybe there were 5 things that I was doing in order to get to the result at the end. But it wasn't optimized for reliability and for repeatability. So basically, all of those processes were not mechanical enough. Another word for not mechanical enough is not boring enough, because we want our processes to be extremely boring. We don't want any surprises when we're reinstalling something. Boring is extremely good when we're talking about these specific processes. And another mistake that I made, this is a little bit surprising, but automation is actually not a good thing here. Let me explain. When you automate, there is the first part of it is going to take a very, very long time to make it robust and to make sure that everything is working. Now, before I keep going, if you're interested in Linux, you probably are interested in creating your own tools and your own AI tools as well. But I know that if you're just a beginner or if you're non-technical, it's very difficult to get started. So that's the reason why I created a free online course about doing that. So you can click on the link in the description to get started. Now at this point, you are probably thinking, that seems like a lot of work for something that I don't have to do with other operating system. So why would I use Linux if I don't use Linux right now? I mean, it just seems like more work compared to other operating system. It doesn't feel like it's better at all. And so that's where a lot of people give up on Linux because it's very difficult to install anything at all compared to other systems. And that part is true. Installing the things that you want to have on your Linux system in order to have a custom setup is pretty difficult. Most Linux users are never going to tell you that, but this is the truth, and I'm telling you that because I think we need to understand the trade-offs and why Linux actually is better if you understand that part. And I'm going to explain why this is actually better depending on your situation. It's not always the case, but if you're going to use it professionally and if you want something extremely robust that never breaks and that is extremely reliable for doing your work, this is a lot better. So basically, it's a lot more durable. This is for if you want to have something that is extremely reliable long term, as opposed to having something that you are always going to update and get the new thing. If that's what you want and how you look at what you're doing, then that's Linux sucks. Like, it's really, really not good. And I'm not saying that doing that is bad, right? I'm just saying that for professional use, if you want something that is extremely reliable, then that's not going to be the best way to go about it. But a good way to do that is if you're using your system for personal use or for fun, then that could be extremely valuable to you to get the latest version of everything and at the price of things breaking maybe. But if what you want to do is have a setup with specific tools that are not going to change that much, but that are extremely useful and that you need to rely on, then that's a completely different setup, because that's the way I use Linux. I'm a freelancer and I have clients that I have to work with, and I can't afford to have a weird thing that is breaking because a software got updated. There is a new version and now it's not compatible with the rest of the setup. I can't afford that. So if you can't afford that, then Linux is extremely good because you can control the versions. You're not forced to do updates. You can get like a 10-year-old version of Linux and a 10-year-old versions of every software that you're using. Control plus reliability. That is correct, there is a trade-off, but only if you don't know how to solve for that trade-off. So, for example, in Linux, yeah, installing is more difficult, but what can make it easy to do that is having a really robust process to reinstall everything. And then you get the best of both worlds. You get extreme control and extreme reliability, but also you get an installing process that is extremely easy and mechanical and boring. And the first part of it is, what did I replace the snapshot with? Mechanical processes is the answer. So what does that mean in the real world? It means really thinking and looking at how to install something in the most boring way possible. What is the most standardized way of installing that thing? If you don't have the answer to that, there's a very easy way to figure that out. Is just asking an AI. But that's just for the granular improvements. Let's talk about the big picture, which is the reinstall kit. And there is two specific parts in the reinstall kit. The B here stands for the baseline. That's where you're gonna lock in the systems and the software and the versions that you need in order to get to your ideal setup. For example, you choose your specific Linux distribution. So for me, I use Ubuntu, and then you specify the version that you want in order for it to be extremely reliable. So maybe 22.04 LTS, that could be a very robust version. That's just an example, but that's just so that you understand what I mean. Then you have your software. So in this case, just as an example, I put Python with the exact version that I use. 3.12.3 or whatever the thing might be for you, so that you have a system that is reliable for a specific version. So basically this part is very easy, so you can just use the versions that you already are using right now, or you can ask an AI what is the most robust and still up-to-date version of that specific software, and make sure you really think about that, because the more you think about it, the easier it's going to be later on. And then we move on to part 2. And basically what it is it's just an execution checklist of all of the processes to do in a specific order. And this one can be as long as you want, because as long as it's ordered and is referring to a specific process, then you're good to go. And then all you need to do when you're reinstalling everything is just check the checkboxes. And in my experience, that makes it the best setup ever. Why do I say that? It's because for me, it's a lot better to have that than having some type of automated system that is going to reinstall your entire Linux setup like in 10 minutes or something. In my experience, it just hasn't worked that well. There are a few reasons for this. I've already talked about like that automation doesn't actually work, but there is also other things. For example, like there are things that have licenses, and maybe you need to send an email to the company so that they reset your license. So obviously that's not going to be easy to automate or to create like some type of a GitHub repo that is going to do all of that for you. If you've been doing that a while, like reinstalling Linux or using Linux for a while, then you probably reinstalled it multiple times, then you probably realize that the actual cost of reinstalling Linux is not doing things manually. The real cost is when things don't work. So the last point about the stateless Linux type of setup, stateless Linux means like you have a GitHub repo where everything gets installed automatically, is that this is not what we want, because when you do that, what ends up happening is you look at the things that are easy to install or can be done automatically, and then you build your Linux setup like that, and then this is what gets installed automatically. And that works, but the problem is this is not what we want to do. I don't want to have to do any trade-off in terms of what I'm using right now in order to make my Linux stateless and to be able to have it automated 100%. If you want to implement this, here is an action plan. Define your baseline. Do a little bit of work to make sure that what you're using is the best version, the most reliable one, and the one that is going to be the most durable. And make sure to write that down on a baseline document. Then define your reinstall kit, which basically consists of the baseline and the processes that you're going to use to install every software or every setup that you need in a very specific order that you really think that is the best order. Meaning that if there is something that needs something else, then that something else needs to come before that something, if that makes sense, right? That's just common sense. But basically make sure to work on the order of the install processes. Then make your processes boring, reliable, unsurprising, like whatever you want to call it. But basically, you don't want to have any surprises. You want it to be mechanical and easy to implement. And again, if you don't know how to do that, this is the type of things that AI excels at. So ask an AI. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.